Hi, everybody. Hoping that you can see and hear us and see the screen. My name is Kat. I'm part of the corporate partnerships team at Richard House, and I'm going to be facilitating today's session. I just want to start by saying a huge apology that we are beginning later than planned. Even a year on, there are still tech issues when it comes to things like Zoom. So thank you for your patience and bearing with us. And we are really glad to be here and to have you all joining us today. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of you for registering to attend this afternoon, and also more importantly for your support over the past year in particular of Richard House, which has been a really challenging time for all of us. So throughout this afternoon session, we're going to be hearing some first-hand accounts of the work that Richard House has been doing, both in working collaboratively with the NHS and also continuing to offer the best care we possibly can to our families across London and beyond. So I'm going to introduce our speakers shortly, but just a little bit of housekeeping. If you would like to ask any questions at all across the session, then we really welcome that. And Jess, who can give a wave, is going to be looking after the Q&A panel on the bottom. So please do pop any questions you have in the Q&A, and after each speaker, we'll look to see if there are any questions. And then at the end, we'll see if we've got time for any extra ones as well. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're joining us from today, that would be lovely. Please do feel free to use the chat function for that. And if you have any technical issues, hopefully our technical issues are over for the day, but if you do have anything, then pop that in the chat as well, and we'll do our best to help you. We are going to be filming the session as well this afternoon, so if you've got any friends or colleagues who weren't able to attend but want to hear about what we're going to be sharing today, then we'll make sure that that recording is made accessible to all of you. So to just introduce who is going to be speaking today, we've got two members of our own care team at Richard House, Janet and Teresa, who are going to be sharing their experiences of working in our residential unit and our hospice at home service. Then we're going to be hearing from Jade, who is part of the Central Children's Long-Term Ventilation Team, which is a relationship that we've been building and working with even closer across the pandemic. And then we're going to be hearing a little bit later on from one of our mums, Katie, whose son Henry received some emergency respite care, and they've been long-standing service users at Richard House as a family. And then to wrap up, we're going to be hearing from Chris, who is our chief exec, and going to be talking a little bit about where we are and where we look to go as a hospice. So that's everything for kind of introductions in terms of what we're going to be doing today. So we'll just head straight into our first speaker, which is Janet. Janet, do you want to just introduce yourself and what your role is at Richard House?
Yeah, my name is Janet Dankwa-Smith. I'm one of the senior palliative care nurses in care.
Lovely. And in terms of your sort of day-to-day work, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences working in residential and how that's changed over the past year with the pandemic?
Yeah, working in the residential care is such a beautiful thing you can ever think of. To be honest, we don't know what we have until we come in contact with these children. And you can really tell that it's no fault of theirs. If you get pregnant and you give birth to a normal child, in quotes, then you know how lucky you are. A lot of the parents, when you have a chat with them, you hear them say they had a normal pregnancy to full term, and then during delivery, things go wrong. And some of them, the kids are well, they are well children, but then along the line, things go wrong. Then you look back and then you realize that you are fortunate. But these kids, they have not called for those things to happen to them. And for me in particular, I look at them and I give them care with my whole heart. And the whole team that we have here do basically the same thing. We laugh, we chat. Some of them cannot talk, they can't move, But then sometimes you get a little smile on their face to say, I'm like, oh, you are welcome. Meaning they are telling you, thank you. Thank you for making me comfortable. Thank you for changing me. Thank you for being with me. And it's a sort of fulfillment and joy that we have in caring for them. In the last year, so many things have gone down the drain. It's been pressure, it's been mental, it's been emotional, and the pressure is so much that I don't know how to put words into it. And it's so scary because you don't want to bring anything that will compromise their health, that will affect them negatively. But we've been fortunate as a team to stick together, to be a shoulder to each other, to help each other, listen to each other, and to have a goal of caring for these kids that are in. And although we couldn't open for everyone regular respite care, we were open for step downs. We were open for emergency respite and things like Henry, you mentioned. And we kind of all the time thinking about parents that are home and that will come in when Teresa comes in with hospice at home. That we keep thinking, how are they coping at home with all the pressures, with the four corners of their house, the kids not going out, we can't go to cinema, we can't have any proper thing around them. You keep asking yourself how they are coping. And sometimes we are lucky when we get a phone call to say, oh, is everyone okay? We're like, oh, we're just thinking about you. You know, it brings some joy. I would say for the past year, the team has done so well, both good and bad, if I should say, but we've got enough PPEs, whatever we need to use to care for these children. We've got our PPE in stock and we've been cleaning. We've got the cleaners doing their job up and down, and everyone has been hands on deck. We're doing everything we can, and we make sure we got kits that we have to take home and do the test before coming. If you have any symptoms, you don't come in. There was a point where a few people have to be off sick because they are coughing and they've got temperatures, and that brought about strain on the team. But then again, we have to manage to pull through for the sake of the children that we have at hand. We've got 3 ventilated children, and it was massive thing. We've never had that before, but where do you want to put them? You can't throw them into the pool in the hospital where they can contact anything. So therefore, we have to just man up and to say, this is our calling, this is what we have to do. Management has supplied us with the kits, as I said, and the support has been somewhat amazing. Other points, we lack other support for people not coming in to say hello. I know there are restrictions that limited people from coming, but we long to see the staff in Richard House calling to say how much we are doing. And that was a point, the fundraising people did a video to let us know, but we're like, oh, that's a bit late. But then it came and everyone was smiling that they did it. So it's nice. And I would say that things have not been the same it was before the pandemic. And our fundraisers and then our charity organization, we applaud you for all the support that they are doing. But we think with this happening around, things have to change. Everyone's life have changed. Everyone is adjusting to one thing or the other. We would love to have more things, more space and more opportunities for these children. Now you can't have, Teresa is sitting by me, but she has to have the mask on. So for me to be free to speak, when she's speaking, I have to have my mask on. Sort of that. There are certain children that you cannot mix them together. There are certain children where they are in respite, the others cannot come in. There are a lot of things when we get more funds, we can create to give opportunity to every kids that come in. And the most joyful thing I would say, where a child, one of our children, has to send a message through to say that he missed us so much and can't wait for COVID to go. You know, it's such a, we were all like, oh, everyone was like, oh, we miss them too. We can't wait for them to come in. It brings the place alive. Seeing them around, it brings the place alive. And we know it's not the same, but we can do better. We can go a long way to help these unfortunate children. We will go a long way.
Amazing, thank you. If I can just, you covered so much there, but just to, you mentioned the 3 children who are on ventilator support.
Yes.
Would you be able to just share for people listening what goes into the care of a child who is on ventilator support for you as a nurse?
Staffing,
I know it's a lot.
Staffing, you have to consider the staff that you are working with, if they are experienced with tracheostomy and ventilation. Some are tracheostomy trained, some are not trained, some are ventilator trained, some are not trained. And then with a trainee, it comes with experience as well. Someone who is just being signed off, you can't leave them alone to look after those children. They need support. So if you know you are working with a ventilated nurse or a ventilated play and care worker, and then any of them go off sick, you are left-handed. You are left handicapped, if I should put it. And then also, if the child, God forbid, has any problem that needs 2 people, we always need 2 ventilated, 2 trachea vent staff to be on duty to help rescue those children. So it brought a very big strain on staff. With training aspect, we need to keep up, the team need to keep up with training. The PDN has to keep up with the training to get everybody signed off, everybody training, but everyone has their level of picking up things and the speed at which they grab things. And one person alone, one trachea vent alone is handy, let alone to have 3. It was a massive, massive risk we took, but it's no fault of theirs. It's a step down, and we have to do what we have to do.
Yeah, well, I think it's fantastic that you're there and we've got the staff who can.
And sometimes we have to use agency. Sometimes we have to use agency, and they come in to say they are trachea vent trained. And sometimes when you are working with them, you realize that they are not too experienced. So then you have to stick with them. And you know, they are very expensive to use, and you have to depend on them. We have to test them, make sure they're not bringing in anything to affect the children or to affect staff and things like that. And it was a massive, massive expense that we have to take.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing a little bit about what that is like. I think it's probably beyond any of our imaginations who don't do it. Just to kind of wrap that up, Jess, is there any questions in the chat for Janet? Or we can move over to Teresa and then see if there are some for both at the end.
There isn't any at the moment, but okay, maybe we can hear
from
Teresa, and then if there's any that pop up, because I know sometimes people hear things, like to kind of let it sink in and then have some questions from there. But yeah, as soon as there is any, I'll kind of let you know.
Cool, okay. Well, in that case, we'll do a swap, and Teresa, it'd be lovely to hear from you. Obviously from a slightly different perspective as a play and care worker who's been doing hospice at home. If I could just ask you the same question initially, you know, what that's been like over the past year and how it's changed because of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's been good that we can help people, like we can help family in their house. But to be honest, because of COVID, it's a bit, I can say it's challenging. Especially you have to go to people's house. It's like you are risking your life because we don't know, maybe they have COVID there. I will tell you some examples that is good and bad. Okay, like when you get to the house, you have to wear masks, you have to wear gloves, you have to wear apron, you have to cover your shoe. And some family, you can see in them that, okay, from my experience, sometimes when I go to the family, they'll be asking me, oh, when did you do COVID test? Are you negative? I'm like, I have to explain myself that, oh no, yeah, I do tests every day. And because we have to do tests every day before you go to family. So you can imagine poking your nose and throat every day. Like if I go to family 3 times a week, I have to do COVID tests every day and register it to NHS that, okay, I'm free, I'm negative. So, you know, we have a lot of questions like when we got there, but I can't ask them. Though I always ask, oh, is anybody in the family that have COVID? They'll be like, oh, no, but how do I know? But it doesn't stop me doing what I'm doing. It's like I'm putting myself forward. Like, okay, I have to look after these kids, either COVID or no COVID. But you know, before COVID, we used to be like free with the family. They can, you know, there's no question. There's no. We can see some of them are feared that I don't know what she's bringing to the house. Though after you explain to them, but what I normally do, I always show them my COVID result on my phone. That okay, listen, I just did my test, and you know, things like that. But this good side of it that you are there to help people. But some of these families, you don't have anybody. Then when you go there to help them, they are happy. Some of them will quickly go out to do shopping because we are there. And you know, without us going there, they are stuck. Because some of them rely on family, but family, because of COVID, they can't help them. So we have to be there on front line. I can say that. But it's been good. The only downside of it is you are risking your life because, for example, I would just say it's a bad news, but it's good. One of the staff that I know, one of the what do you call it, agency, but she does like hospital home like us. She went to one family. I'm not going to mention because they use Richard as well. So they have a COVID in the family, the dad, the mom, and the sister. But so this lady was going there. Maybe she didn't know, but end up she died.
Gosh.
Yeah, but she came here about 3 days, and then they messaged her that she's gone. Because she came from an agency. But I know that I don't know, but I think she caught the COVID from their family because everybody in the house had the COVID. 3 of them. And she goes there. Yeah, she goes there 5 times a week. So you can imagine. She came here on Wednesday, then she died Friday. So, but what can you do? You still have to do your job. So that's the bad of it. But the good, you have to look at the bigger picture, which is we are helping the family and everybody's happy. So,
yeah, because I know a lot of the families, like you say, they aren't seeing other people other than yourselves when you're going in. I mean, what would you say, sort of seeing families, how do you think they're coping with this pandemic? What are you seeing?
It's affecting their mental health and financial. I don't know how I'm going to put it, but you know that they're struggling. So like I said to you, some of them have family that help them maybe day to day, but because of COVID, the family will say, no, I'm sorry, I can't come to your house. I know one of them that she used to have like cousins around her and they help when we're not there. But everybody said, no, tough luck, we can't come to your house because we want to protect ourselves because the child we go to, they are vulnerable. So you have to think about that. So you can't just risk everything. So the family can't risk everything as well because of the kids. They are worried that, oh, you know, this is the vulnerable children. We can't ask somebody to come in. And that's the issue. It's a big issue, to be honest. But because we are there to do it, I think, well, we're helping.
Definitely,
Okay.
yeah.
Can I top up with Teresa? You know, most of the kids, when they come in, sometimes it's a sort of respite for them on the regular basis when the family bring the kids. And when the kids are down here with us in residential, the family can be resting in the family flat with their children. We offer them their food and everything, we shop for them. So in a way, it's a relief of their budget, a relief, and it's just like a holiday out of their house because they are at peace that we are caring for the children, and then they can also enjoy family time out of their homes. But because of COVID, all those things is restricted now. And we cannot do much by sending them foodstuffs and things in their house until they get over here. So it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a key takeaway I'm hearing, is just the difference in terms of what we can do, but equally I know that all of you there are doing incredible work still, and being able to be there in family homes or for the children that are staying. So yeah, I think I saw someone in the chat say you're both amazing, and I could only second that. I think we have had some questions come in now. So
Okay.
Jess, if I could go over to you, maybe you can.
Yeah, of course. We've got a few questions. So I will
Okay.
start with the first one we got. So got a question for Janet and Teresa. How do you look after your own well-being, doing such an emotionally demanding role?
That's a big question.
I bet.
Sometimes I get home and I'm like, I give a very big sign. When you open the door, the kids are, finally, she's at home. And I'm like, don't touch me, don't touch me. And then they just on my sanitizer, wash your hands, and they give me the drill. Go shower, mommy, take off your clothes, go shower, straight to the bathroom. From the bathroom, they all jump on you. How was your day? And it's just a breathe out. Then you just sigh, you relax in the chair, you're like, oh, what a day. But you know what? Sometimes we just don't think about yourself. You reflect to say, at least you were able to help an unfortunate child. At least you were able to troubleshoot something. And then you reflect of the day, what you've done so far, how well you have done it, and how satisfied are you. Then you recollect, if it's something you forgot to do, you just call the team to say that, oh, can you do this? I forgot to do that. And then you hand over to them. But basically you go home and it's like, oh God, thank you. You meet your kids and they are happy and you have a little time with them and that's it. And then when I'm off, I make sure I have fun.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janet.
Yeah.
How about you, Teresa?
Well, it's more or less the same, but the only thing is, okay, like I have a grandson, just 1 year old. So whenever I come back from outreach, he will like, so grandma, cuddle me, but I couldn't. I have to go straight in the shower and shower, sterilizing my, take care of myself, take off my clothes, change. Sometimes it takes me about 1 hour to come and say hello to him, and but because the job I'm doing is the job I love. I'm here 13 years now. I've been in Richard House, so I love to look after kids. But so that, to be honest, maybe because of the help that you give to the family, I got a lot of satisfaction out of there. I'm like, okay, this family, at least they can go out to do something. I'm here, that personally, that gave me like joy over everything else. So, but when I get home, I won't lie, I get red wine. I just got my glass of wine to calm down, to relieve the stress. And then thinking that, okay, thank God, I don't have COVID yet. I have to test myself again the following morning. That, okay, I'm safe. Sometimes the family, especially my kids, if I sneeze, oh, mom, you have COVID. Because of your job, I hope you don't bring COVID to this house. So I have to prove myself to them. Like, okay, no, I don't have COVID, it's just sneezing. So I have to test myself, show them the result. So in a way, it's a fun. We laugh about it.
Yeah,
you understand?
You have to do that to get through it, really, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I will move on to another one. So I think you did touch on this briefly. So what kind of feedback or conversations have you had from families during the pandemic, especially those receiving hospice at home who maybe haven't been able to get out as much as normal? So I think in regards to that one, it's kind of like, how are the families feeling? How are they dealing with all of this? Because obviously their lives have been turned upside down. Like how are they kind of coping?
It's up and down, to be honest. Some of them cope, it depends on the family. Some of them cope very well. Some of them, they don't even know where to start or where they're going or when all this is going to stop. So, but when we are there, when I'm there, I give them like, talk to them, you know, make them feel good about themselves. Some of them will be complaining, they want to go back home to go and see their family, but they can't do it, you know. Some of them have family here, they can't see them. So it's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's a struggle for them. Some of them really want us to be there for like 3 times a week, but I think because of funding, we can't afford that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I wish that maybe we can get more help so that we can be more helpful to people.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
think
'cause
that's my really concern, because you can see that they really need us. So I'm pleading. I don't know what to talk about that.
No, yeah, I think because you've had to change slightly how you work with hospice at home, haven't you? So you can only do 1 family a day, whereas I think you used to do 2 a day. Yeah. So I can imagine that's very difficult, because you obviously want to help so much, but your hands are tied, really, aren't they, as to what you can and can't do. So no, really appreciate that one. I'll go on to another question, and I think Janet, obviously you talked quite a lot about the cases that we had during the pandemic, the free ventilators and tracheostomy, and someone has just said, if we weren't around, if Richard House weren't here, where would they have gone? Like, where would they have had to go to hospital? Was there any other support?
Yes, they were in hospital. 2 were in hospital, and they have to come for a step down.
Yeah.
And I think we had end of life as well. We've got 1 end of life as well. And if they have to go to hospital, you know, the hospital is struggling with COVID cases and things. And looking at these children, if they don't get out of hospital, they might end up contacting it one way or the other. So we opened the door for a step down just to have them here. And parents of these kids have been so appreciative for having them there here, because they wouldn't know what they would have done. Yeah. They wouldn't know. They will, trust me.
Yeah, so they would have all been kept in hospital, like you said, with very kind of severe consequences that had they contacted COVID. And are the parents able to come and visit their children whilst they're in the hospice? Because obviously I know hospital visits are quite limited now. Are we able to welcome family members in?
Yeah, we allow 1 parent at a time, no external families or whatsoever to come in. So there's a restriction, and none of them is supposed to stay upstairs. We closed upstairs during the pandemic. So you just come in, and then you are tested at the reception before you come in. And basically you come in for a short period of time, and then you don't stay too long to go. I think I haven't seen that of Samuel. Others have been contacting them through virtually to speak to them on Zoom or Teams, or Skype to speak to them, But now that things are easing down, it's kind of more, it's extended to siblings, but minimum invitation from them.
Minimum kind of contact, which makes complete sense when you're obviously having to test COVID every day. Another question we've got is, what has it been like to work on the front line throughout the pandemic, and how has your role changed? Kind of how would you say things have changed from an everyday Richard House to an everyday COVID Richard House?
For me, I have to be both. I'm doing care and I have to do outreach. So I think because of COVID, I'm in both. Before I used to be just full-time outreach. But because we are short of staff in care, and I can say I'm experienced. I'm one of the senior PNC. So I'm trachea trained, vent trained. So I'm like
when you are needed, you are called.
I do a lot of shifts this COVID. Sometimes I do 25 shifts a month. You can imagine. So I only have maybe 5 days off in a month, but I enjoy doing it. That's my passion. I want to help. So
with me, it's changed one way or the other. The way I see things is differently at the moment as a senior staff. all we have to do is to keep track on staff and make sure they are okay. Make sure I put smiles on everybody's face, irrespective of what they are going through. Make the shift comfortable and as lovely as ever. The world is, we've lost a lot of families, we've lost people and things, but it's not the end for us. So let's work with happiness. And you can ask all of them, I say, work and happiness. We make the most of it when we are working. And so far, so good, if I should put it. So far, so good. So far, so good.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. It's just really good to kind of hear your opinions on that. I'll have one more question if that's okay.
Can I say something before?
Oh, yeah.
And then the mask. Oh my God. You can imagine you have to wear mask for at least 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
No, we are struggling. Personally, I struggle with that. So I'm always happy when I'm on lunch break. So I can take it out.
Yeah. Just eating and drinking as much as you can. So
Yeah,
wear the mask.
I drink water like every half an hour. At least that will give me 5 minutes break. You know, because we are not used to it, but
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's part of challenges that we have.
And we used to bring food in a group to eat together. We sit down, we laugh, we eat together. Now we can't do that anymore. We can't
eat my food.
We can't share. We can share drinks. We can't do so. A lot have changed, but we have to find a way of making it happen, and then we feeling happy and less stressed to work with. But I think so far Richard House has been good. I quite remember I contacted COVID as well. And the support I had from my team was so amazing. My kids were so scared. They thought I was going to die. They were on the phone to her. I quite remember a day she called me. A particular day, she called me about 6 times. Every time, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. And Libby said, the director sent me, the director sent me, Master Janet, you have to isolate. And the kids said, why can't I go to my mom? Why can't I hug my mom anymore? Why can't I do that? And I'm reflecting and saying, if these unfortunate children are home with their parents and something like that is happening, they can't even go to these sick children. You know, my children are okay, they understand and they can see, so they can stay away, but these children cannot. You understand? But the team was so fantastic. They gave me gloves, they gave me sanitizers, they gave me masks. And trust me, within 10 days, I was over. And none of my family members contacted it. It was so amazing.
That's good. That's really good.
It was so amazing.
So glad to hear that, Janet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of semi-answered the last question I was going to have, actually.
Sorry.
No, it's good.
That's great. You're predicting what's asked.
Yeah, we've got lots of comments just to say how amazing you both are, and thank you for everything you do. And someone said you need a night out soon when you can.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't ask that question just because you've basically answered it, really. It was just about families, how they feel about you kind of being out in do they worry about you? But I think you've answered that, Janet, and with your experience. So thank you for sharing that. So I think obviously there are some more questions, but we're very aware we've got to move on. So what we'll do is if we've got time at the end, we'll come back to them. But if not, we can always maybe have a chat afterwards and answer them and send those out to the people watching.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well,
I think moving to Kat, I think we'll move on to
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Janet and Teresa. Thank you for taking time out. Just to say, Janet has joined us from her day off today and Teresa is mid-shift. So huge thank you to both of them for being able to be here and to share your experiences. We will move on. So just to pass over now, we're going to be speaking to Jade. Jade, do you want to maybe start by just talking about the relationship that you have with Richard House and how that's changed over the past year as well?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, I'm Jade. I'm one of the clinical nurse specialists from the Central LTV team in London, and part of our team's role is to help facilitate discharge of children who require ventilation via a tracheostomy. And as Janet and Teresa have just explained, the care that goes into looking after these children and how complex these children are. They need to be watched 24/7. So part of our role is to facilitate discharge and also training for parents and professionals looking after these children in their workplaces and at home. So prior to the pandemic, we were aware of Richard House and the amazing work that they do. And like with any hospice, it depends on the catchment area of the child. It's not possible to step down every single child to the same hospice. Although I know everyone loves the work and loves all the children that we manage to send to you, but it is very catchment area dependent for these hospices. But actually, throughout the pandemic, as Janet and Teresa have just answered, actually, if Richard House wasn't available to take these children, they would have stayed in hospital. And actually, that is not the best place for these children. A lot of the time, for children who are ventilated via tracheostomy, it takes them a very long time to get home. There's a lot of barriers that are put in front of these families, and it can take quite often months to get them home. And quite often we find that they're clinically well and could be looked after in the community, but actually there's maybe certain barriers. So for example, housing might not be suitable, and actually that might mean that they have to stay in hospital for longer. And we're very sort of strong in our thoughts on this. Actually, hospital is not the best place for either the child or the families, because they're in a very clinical environment. That is not the environment they're going to be in at home. They're exposed to traumatic situations of other parents and families, when actually that's not what we want. And also it impacts the child's development being in hospital. And actually we find that when we step these children down to a place like an amazing place like Richard House, that actually they thrive because they're stimulated, they have access to these facilities. And again, going back to the visitation, as Teresa quite rightly said about, in hospital, we have certain policies in place, which is rightly so, but it does actually impact families visiting. Units that look after these children in hospital are very centralised, meaning that families have to travel very far into London. So we've recently had a child that we've stepped down to Richard House, and the support has just been amazing. It's meant that the child's been moved closer to home. Both parents are able to still work, but also come into Richard House when they're not at work, because it's a 20-minute journey rather than an hour and a half driving into central London. It's financially better for them. Siblings have been able to visit also. And as was mentioned earlier, these children are super complex, and people need to be trained to look after them, because they need to be looked after 24 hours a day. They need to deal with the emergencies and the potential things that could go wrong with their health. So it's not only the nurses at Richard House that need to be trained to look after a tracheostomy ventilated child, but we also have to train these parents. So even the staff at Richard House have done such an amazing job, because we initiate that training in hospital in the centralised sort of centre in London. Then we step the child down, and then Richard House have the facility to continue that training. And I have helped with that. I've gone to Richard House and supported the team where necessary and did the final, if you like, sign off of parents. But the nurses there were amazing in actually getting parents to consolidate and be confident in looking after their child independently, because Richard House isn't a clinical environment. It can be clinical, but it's meant to be homely. It's meant to be a place that actually it gets parents and families more confident in caring for their child and de-intensified, if you like, and they're not in hospital, and it's a closer step to home, because quite often these children and families have been in hospital for a very long time, so they're used to the ongoing monitoring, all of the noises, and actually it can be very daunting to then just go straight home from hospital. I think is that
yeah. Yeah, loads covered there. And I think what you're talking about in terms of step down care, I'll be very honest, until I started working at Richard House, I had never heard that term, and I had no idea what that meant. So I think kind of making people aware that that's something that children's hospices do is really valuable. And maybe, I don't know if you'd agree with this, Jade, a kind of a gap that there isn't really an alternative place for something like that to happen.
There isn't. I'll be honest, we do. A lot of children do go straight from hospital to home, and obviously, like with anywhere, hospital units, hospices, Richard House included, it does depend on how many beds are available and staffing levels. It's not just a simple thing of, oh, we're going to move them to Richard House, but it's definitely something we're encouraging teams to consider. And as part of my role, we facilitate other London centres in discharging these children. And I'm based at the Brompton, but we facilitate the discharges of other children in other centres. So we really encourage teams to think, is step down, is that a possibility at all for a child, whether it be just for a few nights or the longer term placements that might be a few months. We always try and get those referrals rolling to even the respite care. We're very much aware that when these children home, they come into Richard House for a few nights, even just to, maybe not even nights to stay, it might just be to access the facilities, to give parents a couple of hours break to be able to do their daily chores or to spend time with another sibling. So we're really encouraging the centres to look at where the child lives, and if it's within the Richard House area, then actually speak to Richard House, find out what they can offer, because the experience that we've had as a team for our patients and the children that I've seen step down, you've done an absolutely amazing job. And actually, I don't think some of these families would cope with going straight home, and actually step down has massively benefited them from a confidence point of view and holistically look to care for them as a family.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of want to just take what you've been saying one step further and ask a final question. I mean, you touched a little bit on sort of being able to take children out of hospital, which is potentially a place where they would witness or experience trauma themselves. And I think that's very true even in, you know, non-COVID times, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess kind of looking towards the future, a bit of a big picture question, but what would you maybe see as an ideal future of collaborative working between, you know, hospitals like Brompton and the service that you run and someone like us at Richard House?
I think it's all about providing people with that awareness and knowledge and running more events like this. We certainly, as part of our LTV, so long-term ventilation discharge pathway, have a step down as part of our policy and pathway, that it needs to be mentioned. We need to suggest it and actually look into all of those options, because we've very much seen firsthand how daunting it can be for children to go straight from hospital to home, and we've actually seen discharges fail from that, and actually step downs that maybe weren't available or weren't offered would have really solved that problem. So for me, I would definitely say, in my opinion, it would be the awareness. Ask, make contact, do the networking, speak to people, because we've made so many sort of professional relationships via stepping our children down to Richard House and other places, that actually it is invaluable, because you can just contact even the staff at Richard House, contact our team for their own training needs, and from having that experience and communication between professionals, we can really recommend services, and other professionals might not actually, and teams might not actually be aware that Richard House exists and what they can do. And actually, one thing that is very unique about Richard House is that they are able to look after these children that require long-term ventilation via tracheostomy, because they are super complex and very high risk children. You need to know how to manage those emergencies. Some children are dependent on the ventilator. If they come off, they do not breathe. And some children do. And you need to have that background knowledge. As Teresa just said, you can't just train someone up, sign them off and go, yeah, go ahead. You need to have that experience and support. And the support that you all have in the Richard House, and you do an amazing job of supporting each other as well, and reaching out when you need. So yeah, it's been a privilege to work with you all.
Oh, I'm sure the care team would say the same in return. I think also credit to you as well, Jade, the work that you and everyone at the team at Brompton are doing, and across London as well. It's fantastic. So I think, you know, it's great that we can be working collaboratively in that way to get children into the environment of Richard House, and yeah, be able to sort of see more of those transitions go effectively and last, rather than, you know, having them not succeed, like you said. So definitely, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Thank you so much to kind of take on board. I'm not sure that we've got any questions as of yet, but everyone, please do feel free to keep popping them in the chat, and we will definitely get to them and come back to any at the end that haven't been answered. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we'll move straight on. So I know we've got our Richard House mum, Katie, has joined us now. So we're just going to get a slide up onto the screen so that you can all see Henry, who is Katie's son. He's there with his sister. I think, is that Eva, Katie?
Yeah, that's Eva.
Yeah. So just want to kind of talk a little bit about you, if we can, about your sort of experience with Richard House, maybe before the pandemic, and then also I know that we have done some additional support for you across the past 12 months as well. So yeah, it'd be lovely if you could just introduce yourself and Henry and tell a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for having me. I should say that Henry has another little sister who's she's 4, and my husband Neil's obviously not on the picture, so clearly didn't make the cut with the pictures there. But yeah, so Richard House has been part of our life since since we had Henry. So he's going to be 6 in a couple of weeks now, which is just ridiculous. Can't believe he's 6 already. So a little bit of background. Eva, we had back in 2013, and we were pregnant again with Henry quite quickly, and fine, everything fine with my pregnancy, all went well. And then unfortunately, when I came into hospital on the day of Henry's birth, I'd had a C-section with Eva, and so what happened was a series of unfortunate events, but I had a uterine rupture, so my scar where Eva had come out completely ripped apart while I was while we were in labour, and Henry unfortunately kind of came away from the uterus and was kind of eventually found kind of in my stomach cavity. So he'd been without oxygen for as long as you could be without oxygen, needed resuscitation, everything you can imagine in terms of when you watch these horror stories. And then we ended up going to the Royal London Hospital to intensive care, and he had a process called cooling. So they basically put children into a hypothermic state to kind of try and preserve as much as possible while they kind of, again, recover as much as is possible during those kind of events. So we were in hospital, and as you can imagine, it was just every kind of parent's nightmare, just lots of things happening, lots of information. You kind of really don't know if you're coming or going. Obviously, I just had a major kind of, emergency procedure, and you've got, this newborn that's in an incubator, and you've never ever heard of kind of this kind of brain damage and what the terms that have been kind of thrown at you. And basically we went from there to a hospital. We went to Whipps Cross Hospital after that, and it was really apparent very early on, sometimes with these cases and lots of friends that we've made along the way, things appear normal, and then maybe as time goes on you might see some things at the effect of like kind of the trauma, whereas with Henry we were in the situation where from the beginning we knew he couldn't swallow, he couldn't feed properly, he was stopping breathing, we were having all these kind of lots of things happening, and so yes, we knew we were in a situation where things were quite intense, and we had an 18-month-old child, and so we were kind of lost really, and so we stayed in hospital trying to make sure we could get everything in place for Henry, and that's really where Richard House came on board. So we were under the palliative care team in our local community, and they put us in touch with Richard House. And again, never heard of, I think we'd all heard of a hospice, probably had connotations of what a hospice was. I never thought as a mum in my early 30s, I'd be looking around a hospice, and it's one of those things you don't imagine that you're going to do. And the great thing about Richard House is that you come in and you just are a parent. You know, you're welcomed. Everything's really nice. It's all really kind of quite normal. Even when you go in with like lots of things in your head going, you know, why am I here? You're faced with something that's very normal, and you feel welcome, and you don't really have to explain all the things that happen with Henry. You know, we're a family that carry oxygen with us. We have a suction monitor, you know, a SATS monitor on him all the time. He's beeping away. We need to suction him. We need to, you know, we're a chaotic kind of bubble that which just works, and we're all fine. We do loads of lovely things together, but actually places in kind of a situation where things are kind of quiet and normal, we're not really, you know, we're quite noticeable. Whereas in Richard House, everyone gets it. You know, suctioning Henry in the middle of a room doesn't make, you know, no one bats an eyelid. That's just, you know, what happens. And we just really, again, like the last speaker, Jade mentioned, that, you know, we were in a situation where we'd been in hospital and all these kind of medical interventions and, you know, all these things that were going on. We had never any experience of doing that outside of a hospital ward. And so the thought of doing that at home was just terrifying, you know, to think that we would be having to do this, and if there was an emergency, and how would we deal with it, and what we were going to do. And so we had what we call a step down, that we left hospital. So it was just before Henry was in hospital for 2 years, and then just before his kind of second birthday, we had a step down to Richard House. So my youngest was 6 weeks old, and we moved into Richard House with Henry. So basically, I bought 2 babies home that in 2017. So everyone was came home in the March of that year, and yeah, Richard House has just been a part of our life ever since. That we get respite from them, and you know, I always say that for us, we always wanted to make sure that our children had everything. You know, Henry didn't stop us doing anything, because we include him in everything, and we try and do as much as we can. And we never want to look back and think, oh, you know, I really wish I'd done that for our children, and we couldn't because of X, Y, and Z. And I think with Richard House, it just means that we can know Henry's really well looked after, even though he's so complicated, we can trust people to kind of look after him overnight. And it means we can have really good dedicated time with our daughters, which is needed. You know, Henry needs that. If Henry's around, Henry needs our full attention. So sometimes it kind of feels like you're maybe not giving everything to your other children. And so to have that time together is really special. And that's what Richard House really do support us to do. And most recently, we've had building work done to our house to allow Henry to move downstairs. So now he's a little bit bigger, we need hoists to help support him. And so we have had that. And so he came across for a couple of weeks while it was the dusty work, and he stayed there for 3 months because the dusty work was pretty intense, and it was not the situation for Henry. So again, we were so grateful that they could support us to do that, because building work and things like that are difficult for any young family, but we weren't in a situation where we can't just move Henry to kind of a different location. It's just kind of quite restricted in terms of what we can do. So again, Richard House was just invaluable to make sure that we can kind of, I suppose, go on to the next step where, you know, Henry continues to live in our house, and, you know, we can enjoy everything that we can do with him, and, you know, he's safely kind of cared for with the equipment that we need. So yeah, there's a very whirlwind, sorry, throwing everything at you, but that's, you know, and Henry's, you know, he's obviously very severe in terms of the needs he has. He's 24/7 care. He's, you know, but he's such a little character, and everyone that meets him loves him, and, you know, he's got a real personality. He's non-verbal, but, you know, he has his own way of kind of communicating things. The girls are amazing with him. They know what he's kind of asking normally to put the TV on, is usually what Henry's asking for. But yeah, he's a real joy. He's kind of not what we expected, as any family, I imagine, in our situation would say, but we've learned so much and have support, and that's part of kind of being able to carry on, is that you've got somebody that you know that you can turn to kind of get advice, and other families who have maybe been ahead of us and have been through things that we face in the future. And it's just nice to know that you're kind of not alone on quite you know, tricky journey.
Yeah, I would just say, having met Henry, his smile lights up a room. So yeah, I think it's obviously wonderful to hear the experience that you've had with Richard House, and thank you for sharing your story with
no.
everyone, which is obviously very personal. I'd like to just ask one final question, if that's okay,
Of course,
sort of
yeah.
touching on it there, but what do you sort of feel about the future, and where do you see Richard House within that?
So just part of our, you know, they are just part of us, you know. We are, they're factored into everything that we do, in terms of thinking about, you know, even just entertaining Henry in the holidays. He comes over to use the sensory room, and the girls kind of love coming and playing in the amazing garden that they, you know, always beautiful to go to. And yeah, and obviously, as I said, and we know there's going to be turns in our road that we can't predict, but we know that obviously Henry will not have the life expectancy that he would normally have, and we know that Richard House will be a big part of everything that we will face in the future. And it's really great to know that you've got that support from people that you really do know quite well. And so, yeah, Richard House are just, yeah, part of our family. It's all I can say, really.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think, you know, it's wonderful that Richard House is able to be there for, you know, the whole journey. And certainly I look forward to a day where those of us who aren't at the hospice at the moment can get back there and see you and all the other families who we miss as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for sharing and for joining us. I think we have got a question, one for you and one for Jade, actually. So Jess, do you want to?
Yes, of course. So I'll do the one for Katie first, if that's
Yeah.
okay. So it's firstly, you're an inspiration. How has family coped after the past 12 months with limited face-to-face support available? What kind of support were you able to access to help?
So we are in a position that, again, obviously COVID has thrown up kind of lots of, again, things that you never thought you'd have to be thinking about. And we have a team of 5 nurses that work with us to kind of care for Henry 24 hours a day. And we were able to kind of keep that going. And so obviously, in terms of our kind of direct support, that was kind of, you know, we needed that, as in we would not be able to function if we didn't have any care in our home. There's been a few kind of positives, I would say. So I don't know if you can imagine like how many appointments we have to have as a family to kind of go to Henry, and actually some of the ones that you do end up going to, as we probably all do, you've all been to an appointment that you think, actually I could have just spoken to somebody on the phone, and actually doing that via Zoom, or you know, you're not carting Henry off like across London, and you know, so there's some real benefits of it. But in terms of the support, we've been really lucky here, and also obviously we were very lucky that Richard House were able to take us, even though we were literally there at the height of the second lockdown. But again, there were so many kind of things in place to kind of make sure that everybody was looking out for everybody, and yeah, touch wood, we got through it, and hopefully we've all got through it if it's the way it's looking. But yeah, still managed to get some support, which is good.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Katie.
No problem.
Appreciate that. So Jade, we've just got a question here to say, how long has the collaboration with Brompton been established for?
I mean, this is probably not going to be a very in-depth answer, because I've been in the team for about 3 years, and before that it was branded Hospital to Home. So we've just recently rebranded as a central long-term ventilation team. But I mean, I've been in the team for 3 years, and we've had contact with Richard House since I started. So it's been a very long established relationship, but because we've had more frequent step downs of our patients there, that's allowed us to build up the relationship between the staff, know what they can offer, also support the staff and Richard House with expanding their skills and what they're able to take, and the complexity of the children that they're able to take. So it's been a long time. I'm sorry it's not more of an accurate answer. I hope that answers it.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's hard when you've started somewhere and it's been before that. So it's good to get an idea of the amount of years. So thank you. I believe that's all the questions, Kat.
Great. Okay. Well, keep popping them in the Q&A, anyone who does have anything come to mind, because as we say, if there's some time at the end and there's any outstanding, we'll try and get to those. Thank you so much, Katie and Jade. I think we're going to move over now to Chris, who is our Chief Executive, as I said, and going to just talk a little bit about where we are now as a hospice and where we'd like to go. So Chris, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, and thanks to all the speakers. It's been very interesting listening in. As I think it's been clear from the previous speakers, it's been a year of sort of real challenge for Richard House. You know, I don't think some of you will be aware, but actually where we're situated actually was known nationally as the COVID triangle, because it actually had some of the highest COVID rates in the whole of the UK, and therefore, you know, that created extra pressures on the hospice and obviously on all the families. And you know, I know when I was feeling sort of bad during lockdown at various points, I did actually think about our families, because you know, imagine being in a home with a child with significant medical needs. Often, you know, it's not a particularly large home. You've got other siblings there probably going a bit stir crazy themselves. And, you know, the fact you're trying to shield that child as well as yourselves, you know, it must have been, you know, a tremendous pressure. And certainly, you know, as we look to our longer term plans, you know, we've got to react to that to deal with the aftermath of what has been a really difficult period. If I go back 14 months, 15 months, believe it or not, 2021 was our 20th anniversary year. And we had loads of plans for great fundraising events and everything else. We're looking to expand hospice at home. And it was towards the end of February 2020, I attended a national hospice call regarding COVID. And I think the nearest thing I've ever seen to that call, which was a Zoom call, was I think the first Zoom call I had was the fact that it was more like something from a Hollywood disaster movie. And in that call, they set out what we were about to hit, or we were about to come up against. And at that point, you know, there were still concerns about the deaths going up to about 500,000 unless the government did something. This was about 3 weeks before the government did lock down. But also talked through the long-term effect, and effectively it said in that call, which is quite interesting, that really the only chance of coming out of this was through vaccination, and the earliest, and it'll be a miracle if we do it, the earliest we can do that is by Q3 2021. So even back at the beginning of 2020, the advice we were being given was it was going to be 2 years really before we were properly out of it. The one plus of this call was it was an immediate call to arms, and we immediately set up a working group, and that enabled us to take a series of actions which has actually ensured the hospice is still here today. So one key area was fundraising, which basically was office-based. We immediately purchased 14 laptops, which came within a few days, which allowed them to carry on working. We also started buying PPE. And we also started measures to lock down the hospice by everyone working from home. And that made a really big difference, those early steps. And it enabled us to keep our hospice at home services going for longer as well. But also it meant that when we did lock down, our teams had the computers and that to carry on working. You know, 2 weeks later, we tried to order a laptop, and I think the delay was then 3 months. But because we were there just a bit ahead of time, we got them within a few days. So those early steps were really important. At the same time, mutual support arrangements came into place between us and the local NHS hospitals. And again, that's the first time in the 3 or 4 years I've been here, those have been activated. And again, we talked about some of the children coming out of hospital for step down, and because we can deal with track complex cases. Certainly, I think, you know, there's been, you know, our role in helping the NHS to free up some beds has become more important in this period. But again, back to those early days, the first request we had on that mutual support thing was for body bags, because at that point the hospitals were actually running short, and also the beds themselves. So that again shows, you know, it seems a long time ago now how desperate things were in March, April 2020. So moving on, so we have therefore transformed to working mainly at home outside of care. We locked down the hospice hard, and you know, we have been really tight on PPE, once we had the ability to test people, tests, people changing clothing, shoe wear, we have mats with disinfectant on. All those efforts have been very fruitful. So we've been very fortunate, despite the high COVID rates, in not having any known COVID infections within the hospice, which has been, given where we are geographically and the rates in the local areas, is really quite remarkable. And again, that's a real plaudits to our team in the care and the measures they've taken themselves, because a lot of them have had families who have had COVID, and it would be very easy for it to come into the hospice itself. And that has given parents confidence throughout as well. I think as well, the biggest challenge we had throughout the whole period was actually on Christmas Eve 2020, when I was talking to our director of care. And at that point, I think half the care team who were rotated for Christmas Day had to sign off, either because of symptoms or, in more cases, because someone in their family had symptoms. And so we were desperately trying to get staff in to manage residential and look after the children on Christmas Day. And again, due to people's immense flexibility, we managed to do that. But that probably was the tightest point. And then since then, the benefit of the vaccinations has actually come through. So we actually have had lower rates of staff absence in the subsequent period, which has been obviously very helpful. So the other thing which came up last year was we had hospice at home, and as I said, we were planning to expand it. But in the summer months, I think there was still a reluctance for a number of parents to have their children coming into the hospice, and obviously people weren't going away on holiday as much as they normally would. So we found a massive demand for our hospice at home service, and we actually had some of our team who normally work in residential moving out to hospice at home. And even with that reallocation of some of our team, we still had unmet demand for the hospice at home service. And so that is something which we are now considering in our future plans, because certainly I think there's, as I say, the families have been through a very, very challenging period. So we see the need for support, to give people a break, to give people time to recover, being very, very important in the coming months and years. And therefore, how can we assist in that process? So coming out of this, what we're looking at is expanding our residential care facility. We currently have 5 beds, and I think realistically we could get up to have occupy 8 beds at certain times, because we're generally having 2 or 3 step down type cases, as Jade was explaining, from transfers from hospitals and the like. Then we generally have 1 or 2 respite cases in the week, most children being at school in the school weeks. And then we have far more demand on weekends and holidays. So therefore, we could see ourselves moving with perhaps 4 or 5 children in the week, moving up to perhaps an occupancy of, say, 7 or 8 at the weekends. And that, I think, would actually enable us to meet the demand we believe will be there in the coming years. And therefore, that means making some physical changes to the hospice to expand our bedrooms. We're already taking steps to recruit more staff, and clearly that will be a key element of that as well. But we do see, going forward, say to 2025, a need for this. We also, as I say, the hospice at home service has taken off in this period, and we see that continuing as well. So we have still 15 to 20 families who are on the waiting list for that at the moment. So again, we've got to look to see how we can fill that gap as well. And so I think that again will be another key element. But I think one real plus for this whole thing is the closer working between us and the wider NHS. And therefore, I'm sure as we go forward, we'll be working far more closely, but in lots of areas, which again, there's a real knowledge and understanding of the role we can play, which again, I'm sure will lead to more transfers perhaps than historically. So I think, as I look forward to our 2025 plan, we're looking very much to grow the hospice to meet the needs in the community, and those needs have become that much clearer over the last year or so, and also to help address some of the obvious damage which has been caused by this lockdown period and the disruption that's caused and the stress that's caused on families and family life. And in that final regard, we're also looking at, you know, other services we can provide to support families, you know, from, you know, both in terms of therapies, but also in terms of mental support as well, and how we can provide a holistic solution to the families we serve. So that, in a nutshell, is what it's been like and where we're heading. So lots of challenges ahead, but I have to say that the team at Richard House have just been amazing during this period. And so thank you all for joining us today. Back to you, Kat.
Thanks, Chris. That was really, really informative. And I can see there's loads of really good questions in the Q&A actually. So we'll head straight over to those. And Jess, do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah, absolutely. Just trying to work out the ones to go to first. So this one is obviously for you, Chris, actually. So how has the experiences of COVID changed the vision for Richard House's future? And to kind of add on to it, how are we planning for life after COVID, and what's the goal for the next 12 months?
Right. Well, I think, I guess, what the COVID period has done is given us a greater understanding of the needs in the community, because of the changes. People and families have come forward asking for help, asking for services, and therefore I think, you know, the demand for our services has definitely become greater, and we're more aware of where that demand is. I also think that some of the closer working with NHS and the greater awareness within the NHS has led to improved signposting to the hospice as well. And so again, more people are becoming aware of how we can help and the services we can offer. So therefore, I would say the immediate issue we've now got is actually in all areas, we've probably got too much demand for our current offering. And therefore, you know, given that demand is not going to disappear, we're going to have to look to see how we can meet that demand, hence the expansion plan. So we've got to look to fundraise, we've got to look to support everything else. I think in terms of the way we work, so we have put more IT changes through in the last 9 months to a year than we've done in the last probably 10 years, which has to be honest with you. But no, so we're now totally on the cloud. We have secure fibre links in with the NHS systems. We have a lot of extra software, so everything can be done remotely. And so that is not only facilitating various activities on the care side when nurses and plain care workers are out at families, but also within the hospice as well. And so that is going to have some efficiency savings in due course. But also, you know, working from home, I think out, obviously not in care, but working from home is clearly going to be part of the way we function in future. So that means changing office configurations and looking at our working model, because I think in some areas, you know, certainly working from home, say 3 days a week makes a lot of sense, and then having a couple of days in the office. So our working practices will definitely be changing as well.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Chris. You did briefly mention waiting list for hospice at home service. Someone has asked, what percentage of requests are you unable to fulfil for hospice at home? Do you have a figure for that, or can you just say the...
Well, I would say at the moment it's probably, you know, so these numbers do vary a bit, but I would say there's probably 30%. So if we expanded our current capabilities, capacity by about 50% is what we need to do. So it's quite a big increase.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Have all of our staff had both vaccinations, or been able to have both vaccinations? Now, I believe the answer is yes, because I know I've had both vaccinations at the moment, and I can see Janet nodding. So everyone's had the option for the
absolutely. So we were prioritised alongside obviously other frontline NHS workers. So everybody in the hospice got their first vaccination offer in January, and I think now most people have had their second one in March. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So one just come in saying, I guess the new challenge will be how to raise the funds / budget to support / provide the extra needed hospice at home care. How do you propose to raise these funds?
Absolutely, and I guess that is ultimately, so if you look at how much money we're getting from the NHS, and the NHS have provided COVID grants over the last year, which have been very helpful. but that is sort of like a one-off. So basically, if you look at our future forecasts, we generate, we only get about a quarter to a third, it varies somewhat, of our costs covered by the NHS. So 2/3 to 3/4 have to be raised from donations and supporters. So obviously events like this are to raise our profile and hopefully encourage everyone to give us some more money. But basically the only way we're going to achieve this growth is really through donations and voluntary support.
Yep, absolutely, thank you. Which kind of leads us nicely on to, is there any planned Zoom fundraising events? Which it says for Chris. I don't know, Chris, if you want to answer this one, but I know both. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, maybe given you're in fundraising, you're probably better placed than I am on this. But the answer is yes, there are plans, and having failed to have our 20th anniversary year, we're now planning to have our 21st anniversary year, which hopefully will raise some funds. So there's a lot of things coming down the line, but obviously, again, some of those are quite COVID dependent. But we're increasingly hopeful that a number of those will take place. But yeah, absolutely, there's a whole series of events and some Zoom-based events being planned. And I'm sure if you haven't heard already, you'll be hearing more about this from our team.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to reiterate that when I was passing it over. I was like, well, we kind of are organising them. So yeah, do keep your eyes open if you are part of the newsletter. Everything goes out on there pretty much. But if not, you can go on our website and you can subscribe for that newsletter as well. So you'll be able to get all the updates from Richard House, which includes most of our fundraising events. But hopefully we might be able to do some face-to-face ones this year, everything crossed, which would be really lovely to see people again. And then I've got a couple here, which are kind of older questions. But again, I think, Chris, this might be a good one for you to answer, actually. And then we'll probably have to make this our last one because obviously we're aware the event needs to finish soon. So could our families be asked to test themselves with lateral flow tests ahead of visits by the hospice at home team? So it doesn't seem fair that they take all the precautions and all the risks when they go to help. The tests are so easy to obtain. I don't know if that's something we've looked at or... Yeah,
I think so. I think we have been giving out, because lateral flow kits have become more available, and we've been, initially we've actually bought some tests ourselves before the NHS provided them, because we've always decided, thinking what we're going to do, irrespective of what the NHS was doing. Sometimes there were quite a lot of delays, but we then would depend on the NHS supplies, and there were certain criteria as to how those supplies could be used. But we're now in a position where I believe we are providing families with kits at home of the lateral flow variety so that they can test themselves before they come in. And obviously those kits are now actually generally available to families, if particularly they've got school age children. But yes, so certainly I think I lose track of time on this, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, I know we had that discussion, we were providing those kits when requested.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously the stories were probably pre those kind of lateral flow testing, so it's good to know that that's now in place, and I think you can pick them up from pharmacies and things like that now. So
absolutely,
yeah, no,
so certainly since I must have been lose track of time ago, but it must have been Christmas time, we started introducing testing for anyone visiting the hospice and in our own team. And again, our poor care staff have had to test themselves 3 times a week. They do 2 of the lateral flow and 1 of the PCR each week over this period. So.
No, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'll leave the questions there because obviously I'm aware that we don't want to run over, but I will pass back to Kat for just final words.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, I think with any questions we didn't get to, we'll try and create some answers and we'll send those out with the recording of this session so that you do get your answers. So just to kind of wrap up, I just want to say a huge thank you, first of all, to all of our 5 speakers today for the stories that you've shared and for kind of giving a much more involved overview of what's been going on than certainly I think any of us in the fundraising team would be able to. So it's really, really valued to have you here. And then to all of you who are listening, thank you very much for giving us an hour and a half of your time this afternoon. We know how busy it is. We hope that it's been interesting and inspiring to hear about the work we've been doing and where we can maybe go. And that's just to say again a big thank you to you, because as Chris is saying, without you nothing would be able to be done, and we wouldn't be able to be sort of looking at what we can do next and how we can expand. So thank you very, very much. Up on the screen, we've got some keeping in touch details. So if you do have any questions that pop into your head later, or you just want to hear a bit more generally about how you can get involved with Richard House or sign up for things like the newsletter that Jess mentioned, those are some details on the screen. So please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And that brings us to the end of the session. So please do all take care and stay safe. And we hope to welcome you all back through our hospice doors very, very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.